Hi, hello everybody, I'm Justin, this is Koopa, and welcome to Koopa's Corner. Now today I want to talk about the immortal Hulk Hogan. Any wrestling fan knows the name Hulk Hogan. He's one of the biggest names of all time. If you're not a wrestling fan, there's still a very good chance that you know who he is, particularly if you grew up in the 80s or the 90s. Hulk Hogan is one of the few wrestlers who really broke out into the mainstream and became a sort of pop culture icon, paving the way for guys like The Rock to do it and John Cena to do it. Now, very recently, Hulk Hogan passed away at 71 years old, and in the sort of immediate aftermath, there's just been a lot of discourse about Hogan and about his legacy. You have one side who just has all these fond memories of him as a wrestler from their childhood, and they are sort of ignoring all of the bad stuff and just remembering him fondly. And you have another side of people who are sort of ignoring all of the good just to, constantly reiterate, how scummy he was and that he was a racist and this and that, and focusing on the negative parts of his legacy. And I thought it was worth having a conversation about. I mean, both of these things can be true simultaneously. He leaves behind a very complex legacy, and he means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Now, first of all, let's just talk about his contributions to the professional wrestling industry, right? He might be the most important person in professional wrestling history aside from Vince McMahon. He's definitely the most important wrestler. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? Hulk Hogan, he made his debut in 1977, and he signed with the WWF for the first time in 1979. That was under Vince Sr. He also was kind of going back and forth to Japan, wrestling in New Japan, and then in 1981, he was filming for Rocky III, which came out very early 1982, and that helped Hulk Hogan sort of become a little bit more mainstream. It sort of got him some name recognition, right? It was a really big role for him at the time. Shortly after that, kind of between the two, he started wrestling for the AWA. And then he came back to the WWF after Vincent Kennedy McMahon bought it from his father, right? Vince Jr. bought it from Vince Sr. And Hulk Hogan returned, and Vince sort of built the promotion around him. He won his first world championship, first of 12, 6 in the WWF, 6 more later in WCW. First world title, 1984, against the Iron Sheik at Madison Square Garden. 1985 was the very first WrestleMania, and Hulk Hogan was in the main event. Hulk Hogan teaming up with Mr. T against Rowdy Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. And, he had Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling Connection on MTV, right? For those of you who know wrestling history, you know that Vince, he put his house against WrestleMania, the success of WrestleMania. He borrowed money left and right to be able to put this event on. The very first WrestleMania was sort of make or break for this company. Had it been a flop, Vince very well may have gone out of business. And Hulk Hogan is largely responsible for its success, right? Hulk Hogan had a lot of mainstream recognition by the mid-1980s. He brought a lot of eyeballs to the event. He was teaming up with Mr. T, a celebrity. Cyndi Lauper was there. Hulk Hogan, like I said, starred in Rocky III. Well, I mean, he wasn't the star, but he was in Rocky III. He brought a lot of recognition, a lot of legitimacy to the WWF. He's largely responsible from it becoming a wrestling company to a sports entertainment spectacle. It would not be the successful company it is today, if it would even be around at all today, if it were not for Hulk Hogan. So we acknowledge his importance in the history of the WWF. I mean, and if you want to continue, I mean, he moves on to WCW. He turns heel famously in 1996, and becomes the leader of the New World Order, which is probably the biggest wrestling faction of all time, right? I mean, he's got 2 Royal Rumbles under his belt. He's the first man to win 2. He won them in 90 and 91. First man to win 2 Royal Rumbles. He famously body slammed Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. That's 1987, Pontiac Silverdome, 93,000 fans, one of the biggest moments in wrestling history. When you look back at all these big moments, like Hulk Hogan is in several of the biggest moments in wrestling history. After the downfall of WCW, and he made his return to the WWF in 2002, setting up WrestleMania 18 against The Rock, Icon versus Icon. That match itself is not even focused in like highlight reels as much as the stare off in the beginning, when they are standing in the ring across from each other, staring down at each other. Like, that's how big and iconic that moment is, that the stare down is enough for the highlight reels, right? 2 of the biggest names in wrestling history in the ring, Icon versus Icon. 2005, he was still competing. In 2005, not regularly, but he did have a couple matches in 2005. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame, 2005, before he was, like I said, before he was even done wrestling. Like, this man is important to the WWE, the WWE's history, and the professional wrestling industry as a whole. That being said, it is important to acknowledge the dark side. It's important to acknowledge that he was a full human. He had his ups, he had his downs, he had his pros, he had his cons, and just like he had his admirable qualities, he had his flaws as well. And you can't talk about Hulk Hogan and his legacy without acknowledging this. And I think this is the big mistake, is all of the people who are very pro Hogan are just focusing on his importance to the history of the industry. They're not acknowledging, the bad stuff over here, and the people who are against him, they're focusing only on this without acknowledging that history and that importance right over there, right? I mean, in 2015, Hulk Hogan's sex tape leaked, and he very famously went on a very racist tirade in that video. His subsequent apologies were largely, be careful what you say on tape, and not, I'm sorry for what I said. Racist comments since then have popped up time and time again over the years. He very publicly, kind of since around that time, has been supporting Donald Trump, and there's a lot of people who do, but there are some problems with that as well for a man in his position. So it's murky, right? It's murky because particularly later in life, he seemed like a real piece of shit. But his legacy is complex. It's very murky water here. And I just think it's important to acknowledge both aspects of this. Whether you're a fan or a detractor, we have to acknowledge that both sides of this coin exist. All of us have our flaws, all of us have our faults, maybe not to that extreme. Some people, unfortunately, do have those beliefs. He's not alone with those racist beliefs, which is very unfortunate. But we all have our flaws. Hopefully most of us have them to a much lesser degree than that. But also most of us will never, be as important as Hogan was in the WWE. Like most of us, wherever we go in life, whatever we do in life, historically we will not have that kind of impact. So, love him or hate him, I know he's just been a big topic of conversation lately, And I think this is something that not enough people are talking about, that it is okay to have both, you know, virtues and vices. Like, it's okay to be a role model and have done so much work with the Make-A-Wish Foundation and done so much good, but also be bad. Like, this is human nature. Like, nobody is black or white. This is all shades of gray. And to acknowledge his legacy is to acknowledge both the good and the bad. And I just think it's important to say that. I'm not going to ask you to leave anything in the comments this time, guys. But I just wanted to say my piece about Hogan. And thank you so much for watching this, and we'll see you in the next one.